Thank you to our lovely MC for that great introduction. Great to see you all. I'm thrilled to stand here today as your ACT Party candidate and to have this opportunity to talk with you about the state of technology and research and development in New Zealand. Not only because it's a subject that's absolutely central to our current and future prosperity, but also because it's a long-held passion of mine. When I arrived in New Zealand over 28 years ago, I had the single aim, of course, along with starting a new family with my husband, and that aim was to become a scientist. I know, it sounds a bit nerdy, isn't it? Now, let me tell you where this passion for science came from. When I was very young, growing up in India, I overheard a conversation between my parents, and that was about a family friend who was dying because he was ill. As a 9-year-old, that made absolutely no sense to me. After all, I had only recently been sick myself, and Dad had taken me to see a doctor where I was given a medicine. And I recovered within only a few days. To me, that was magical. I wondered why our friend could simply be not given some sort of medicine like me. I guessed that maybe it was because there were not enough doctors or maybe enough medicine to go around. And there and then, I decided that I would become a doctor so that I could hand out medicines to help cure everyone's illnesses. Little did I know that the reason why that family friend was dying was there was no cure for that friend's illness, and that it's scientists, not doctors, who find cures. Well, when that later became clear to me, my course was set for life. And looking back, I have great fondness for that young, naive girl who thought she could save the world by giving out medicines. To be frank, right now, New Zealand's economy desperately needs a cure. And I like to think of ACT as that medicine that could be the thing that saves this country. So I went ahead doing my PhD. And since doing a PhD in biological sciences from the University of Auckland, my working life has taken a few different directions. These have included running a family business, serving as a family's commissioner, leading an NGO helping victims of domestic violence, as a board member for hospice, and as it was said in the introduction, I almost feel like I should whisper this, as a national MP. Across all these endeavors, the skills I learned studying science have held me in good stead. I know the value of evidence-based research, weighing up the facts before you make a decision. And I understand how important innovation and planning is to achieving success. And I know the ACT Party doesn't only share these values, it's built on them. Nowhere has this been driven home to me more than in my business, which began as a confectionery manufacturing business, changed over time to include contract manufacturing for many local and international companies in the health sector, exporting to many countries around the world like Australia, China, UK, Saudi Arabia, and the States. I've learned just how much the decisions of government impact on businesses and communities alike. And I've discovered how important it's to move with the times, keeping up with technological development and innovating, not simply to survive, but to ensure that my business and everyone that it employs can prosper. Sadly, this is not a lesson our current government seems willing to take on board. Nowadays, whenever I attend a function or event and find myself mingling with other business people, our conversations are depressingly familiar. we end up talking about the difficulties of attracting talent, the roadblocks set in our way when it comes to innovating, the challenges of being a small nation, and most importantly, our lack of confidence that this government understands our problems, let alone possesses the ability to do something about them. The politest word I can use to describe our government's approach to research and development and technological development is piecemeal. Labour, in its first term, promised to lift expenditure on research and development to 2% of GDP in 10 years. In this, as with so many other promises it has made, the simple truth is that it has failed to deliver. Right now, the sum of public and private expenditure on research and development sits around 1.47% of GDP. This is far below the OECD average and far below where we should be if Labour was able to keep up with its promise. Worse, the laws and systems we have in place to support future research and development are not only complex, but also hopelessly out of date. This isn't just piecemeal, it's pathetic. Recent history shows that there is a direct correlation between expenditure on research and development and economic success. The bright futures of countries like South Korea, Japan, and Switzerland are instructive here. All of them investing well in excess of what we do. We are trying to compete with one hand tied behind our back by government. Even when we compare ourselves against countries and economies of similar size to us, we are doing poorly. Finland, for example, despite its proximity to the events in Ukraine and the hardships associated with that, ranks much higher than us across a range of variables relating to research and development. Its 2022 Global Index ranking for innovation sat at number 8. Our ranking, on the other hand, has dropped steeply from 13th in 2012 to 24th in 2022. This is the real cost of Labour's incompetence. But in all this, we shouldn't forget New Zealand has always been known for its innovation, and we still have the capacity, both intellectually and economically, to turn things around. The good news is, it's in our hands to fix it. So it falls to us here in ACT to grab the steering wheel and hit the gas. All that's required is a true commitment to research and development that goes beyond the promises that were in the recent budget. Because we are ACT, we don't just oppose for its own sake. We propose good solutions as well. Providing more ways of collaboration and investment in people is good. But what's going to happen to these people once they have done their government-funded research fellowships? The challenge is not that our researchers are not collaborating locally or internationally, or just that we need to train more people. But the real job is to create that capacity in the private sector to absorb these skilled and trained people. Because without that, we will continue to lose them to more attractive opportunities overseas. Labour don't like to admit this, but it's a competition. And for that, we also need to lean more into providing a policy framework that allows for new ideas to flourish. We need New Zealand to become an incubator of excellence, and it can be done. Our primary sector, for example, has long been the lifeblood of New Zealand's economy. We are known for innovation in the field of agriculture, but because the government has taken so much for granted, the rest of the world has surpassed us. As a case in point, our laws in relation to genetic engineering, governed by the Hazardous Substances and New Organisms Act, a piece of legislation which is now a quarter of a century old, is not only restrictive, but hopelessly out of date. Unlike our cousins across the ditch who updated their laws around 4 years ago regarding gene-edited food, Hazardous Substances and New Organisms Act's regulations mean that recent advances in gene editing, and let's remember, this is a completely separate area to gene modification, remain close to us. What does that mean? Technological stagnation. It's a bit like we are stuck with the first iteration of the iPhone while the rest of the world runs around with their iPhone 14 Pro. Imagine. These technologies can not only add efficiencies to our food and farming sector, but significantly contribute to our commitments around climate change too. And would it not be nice, for once, New Zealand politicians contributed a bit more to real solutions to climate change, other than endless hot air? Let me give you a real example. The HME ryegrass, developed by a Crown Research Institute called Egg Research, serves a great example here. Initial research indicates this grass has the potential to increase production by 40%, reduce water demand by 30%, and decrease methane emissions by 15 to 23%. Sounds good, right? Additionally, the potential GDP value based on modeling, which was done around the time when it came to field trial stage, was in the range of 2 billion to 5 billion in additional revenue, should the grass be put into use. You would imagine with such positive outcomes that developing this grass would be fast-tracked by the government. Instead, quite the opposite has happened. Our antiqued laws have precluded the grass from being trialed in New Zealand. So the point is, if our Crown Research Institutes, because they get government support, they get government funding, can't be bothered with dealing with the current legislation to go through the process to seek approval for a field trial, that is, to take their work to the next level, then why would the private sector bother when they have the whole world to choose from? It's a sorry state of affairs. And that's why this year we need Kiwis to choose real change. Overall, biotechnology is definitely one of the most important technologies of the 21st century. Keeping up with our competitors in this field is of fundamental importance to our future, whether it's to improve productivity in our primary sector, tackle climate change, or treating fatal diseases. There's no right or left on these issues, only forward or back. And only ACT has the boldness, the clarity, and the willingness to take this country forward. We need to be evidence-based and much bolder in our thinking than we are now. Our very future depends upon it. Thank you, my friends.